here's what I know. Someone's going to have to start to fight for Nebraska. All right, so I'm here to fight for Nebraska. And finally, the team grows up. It's what people always ask me about year 3. Finally, the team grows up, and they're like, well, I got to go make the play.
It's time to join the Husker Huddle with Nick Handley and Grant Hansen.
Hey there, it is the first Husker Huddle podcast with Grant Hansen. I'm Nick Handley. Appreciate you tuning in, checking this out as we get into the 2025 Husker football season. And off and running we are, because practice got underway on Monday. And Grant, we had a chance to be down there in Lincoln, and
yes,
we were able to survive the heat too, which I know was...
Check out the grass.
Oh, the grass is it's nice.
Do we care about the grass?
Well, if it prevents injuries, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's obviously the key point of putting in that type of grass. And we were seeing images of that leading up to practice on Monday and all the process. If you're a turf nerd, that sometimes I tend to be, I thought, wow, that's really cool. I wonder if I can do that in my front yard.
It looked really, really nice. Yeah. But I had not heard of Bermuda grass before this week. And now all people apparently will talk about is Bermuda grass. I agree with you. I think it's worth talking about if it prevents injury. Other than that, I think it is funny how much it's getting talked about.
It is getting talked about a lot. There's a lot of takeaways. When we were down there at practice, and we're going to get into all of that. Also on the show today, we're going to be talking to Omaha World-Herald Husker beat reporter Evan Bland. Get his thoughts on what he's taken away. Again, the Monday practice, the very first practice of the 25 season, did have a 20-minute window for the media to observe. So we did actually, this isn't speculation. We're not going off of what the players we're talking about afterwards or the coach was talking about afterwards. These are actually, with our own eyeballs, things we got a chance to observe in a 20-minute window. And I think we have to start off with the physical appearance of certain guys. And look, I understand, what does that mean when it comes to wins and losses? Very little, because we've seen some teams that have looked the part before, the get off the bus guys, if you will, and yet that would lead to a 3 or a 4 or a 5 win season, and that was it. But I think there is some merit to at least the work that certain people have put in it. And I always look at it, Grant, from freshman to sophomore year.
Sure.
There's always going to be that natural bulk and progression physically. But I think a lot of us, knowing he went through a shoulder surgery, knowing that he was used in, I would say, sparingly in his freshman year, but Carter Nelson, I think that was the first person that a lot of the media members, myself, yourself included, we saw him and thought, now that looks like a Big Ten playmaking tight end.
Yeah. There are other guys that jumped out to Rocco Spindler, another one. The transfer, likely offensive guard from Notre Dame. That's another guy that, when you have a roster sheet in front of you, trying to familiarize yourself with the new players, you don't have to work too hard to figure out, oh, that's Rocco Spindler.
Right.
There's no looking down to check at the roster sheet to see if that's the guy you think it is. There's other guys that are physically impressive. Jeremiah Jones, a freshman receiver. That guy does not look like a freshman at all. And then, of course, Carter Nelson. You remember the touchdown catch against UNI, playing receiver last year. He now obviously is bulked up, so he's officially listed as a tight end. So he's going to be very, very interesting for me through this year. How do they manage him? Only they really know the specifics of his injury. So how involved can he be? That's another very, very fascinating storyline in a tight end room that has a lot of different versatile pieces, which is, of course, one of the themes of the post-game talk or post-practice talk from this past week.
I think versatility is probably the buzzword right there when describing that group. Another guy that I watched a little bit just in his defensive line drills, but it wasn't until he hit the podium that we're like, oh my goodness. Didn't know Cam Lenhart could get much bigger. He's one of those guys that even when he would speak to the media as a true freshman, he has a very mature look to him. He just looks like a grown man. He's gotten bigger too. And that's important, again, when we talk about the type of workload that he is now going to take on after the departure of Ty Robinson and Ash Hutmacher. And we know that between he and Riley Van Poppel, those guys, it again, going to come down to the quality over quantity reps, but those are guys that their bodies have got to be right if they're going to fill in and continue to help Nebraska, especially in aiding the run in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think I had this theory. We talk a lot about the size of guys, especially that first media practice that's open to the media. I think some of that is shifted by the fact that not all of us, and I think a majority of us, are not regularly surrounded by football-sized people. And so,
whoa!
I know. But like, I think that's really important, and also shifts a lot of our perspective. Wow, the offensive line looks big. Well, yeah, no kidding, they have to be. And you also have to caveat a lot of this stuff. Like Xavier Betts, for example, is a guy who a couple of years ago, that first open practice for the media, I remember going by watching him saying, that guy looks different than everybody else that is out there on the field. And then he proceeded to not play it down that year. Right. So there's a lot of caveats that come into this, but at the same time, those are some of the few things that you can truly observe in that 20 minutes. And it's designed, I think, to some extent to a large portion of that 20-minute open period is just for the media to shoot that needs B-roll and all that stuff of all the different players. So everybody's broken out positionally. You're not seeing a whole lot of stuff. You're seeing a lot of routes on air. And so I think we gravitate to size. But those are guys that Carter Nelson, Cam Lenhart, Jeremiah Jones, guys that really jumped off the page to us that I think were above that sort of bias that I try to fight against a little bit in those sorts of situations.
Well, and I thought Matt Rhule, when he talked to the media afterwards, did bring up, and he was talking more about Teddy Prohaska, but also just the offensive line in general with their build. And we'll tell you a little bit later about Teddy's freakish numbers, especially his vert. My goodness. But I know I've done this in the past of, we're seeing some 6'7" guys. Cool. Because you see a lot of that in the NFL.
Sure.
Well, when Rhule's talking about the things that he's looking for in that growth from the bodies on the offensive line, he talked about not necessarily tall dudes, but guys that kind of had that girth. He talked about the girth and the width here and the width there. And he's right. And as he's saying that, I'm thinking about one of the areas that I was watching on Monday. And this goes back to the tight ends, because Heinrich Harburg is another one of those guys that, look, we know his athleticism. It's been talked about a lot, but seeing just those drills that are going to be essentially mundane to those guys because they're going to be doing it so many times, and just those little fundamental reps, but just watching him explode off of the offensive line in a drill where you're essentially, getting your hands within frame and you're just erupting right to the pad. Watching Heinrich Harburg do that. But, going back to what we need to value probably more than just the physical appearance when it comes to offensive line is when you have a chance to watch some of those drills, how do these guys look like they're exploding off the line of scrimmage? How do they look like that overall power? Because it's one thing for a guy to look the part, but when you see that initial surge and that impact off the snap and that impact from whether they're playing guard or tackle or tight end, what type of push are they getting? Does it look like, okay, they're moving people? And we're not going to be able to see that for a while. It really, until we get to a game.
I mean, they're not even in pads.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But that's where I think the size is great of seeing these guys improve, but what does that explosiveness look like? And I think as much as we can observe that, especially in the first couple of weeks of the season when we're watching that, it definitely trains your eyes to look in different areas as opposed to what the numbers and the stats tell you.
Yeah, I think so. You were watching a lot of the tight ends. You saw a lot of the defense. I spent a lot of time watching the specialists. That's where my eyes were at, because I think that's an area that's really fascinating for this year's team. Mike Eckler comes in as special teams coordinator, and you get to see a new punter in Archie Wilson, who drew some questions post game from Matt Rhule. We'll hear that question, Matt Rhule's response about Wilson later. That was another area that was fascinating, and I watch him punt, and he downs a couple at the 1, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, this is pretty cool. This is like he's punting from like the 45 of across the 50, so it's a 55-yard basically punt. And then I was thinking, well, hold on, nobody's rushing him. Nobody's rushing the snapper. There's a bunch of things that are missing here.
Right.
But that's another guy that can really, really impact this year's team in a different way and has to be good for the team to be good. And then also the battle at kicker, which we didn't see a lot of field goal kicking during the open period today or on Monday. But that was another piece where I was really focused.
Make no mistake about it. I don't think you can predict. I know I can't, as far as what the Archie Wilson addition
Impact.
is going to mean.
Yeah.
But I think so much emphasis when people have talked about special teams improving this year, and they're not wrong when you say, we got to see the football going through the uprights more on a consistent basis. Yes, you do. You need to see Nebraska have a little bit more ability to return kicks and punts and put the offense in a favorable situation, which, again, you're not wrong. But the ability to flip the field, and this is one of those areas that I look at some of the better special teams units, not only in the conference but in college football, that have that ability that, okay, this drive didn't work out. You get stalled out at, say, your own 40. At the very least, though, you should be expecting your defense to be playing and defending, I would say, more than 75 yards, if not more than 80 yards of field.
Right.
And so that ability to flip the field is something that maybe in certain avenues people do discuss. I don't think we discuss that enough. And again, we'll get into what Coach talked about with Wilson's versatility of what he can do. But if you're, whether it's a rugby style punter or more of a traditional punter, if you can find somebody that can tap into that part of special teams, thinking about this defense and the strides that they have to make, especially early on with that front seven coming together, that'd go a long way. If you're allowing those guys to have that much runway to work with, per possession.
Yeah, the more support you can give them, the better. And the more confident you can feel if an offensive drive stalls out at your 40, your 35-yard line, that you'll be in a position where your opponent isn't starting at their 30, their 35-yard line. So ready to take a listen here to some of the weekly sound?
We got some weekly sound. A lot of this coming throughout Monday between Matt Rhule and some of the players that took to the podium. Give it a listen right here.
All the things that we can control, we're trying to teach this week and do, and then finally, situational football. Dana had them out there. They were doing 2 minutes, today on offense. We know the games are going to come down in the Big Ten to the last minute of the game, and so we're at a point now where we can really focus on the situational FBI. So that's several things, but some are football and some are just related to the standards. I saw him a little bit in the summer. I think what he can do is fantastic. I mean, he can roll right, he can roll left, he can really run, he's fast, he can throw. But I'm saying he can punt with both feet, really fun guy, really glad that he's here. But, they're certainly not going to be a moving target, and I think the ability that he has to run the ball and throw the ball, I think we proved last year, I think we faked it a couple times, we'd love to fake the ball. So if you know that you don't know the aiming point and you know that there's always a chance that he could throw the ball or run with it, I think that is going to put defenses really, really at a disadvantage.
I'm excited for the depth behind me. I think those guys come in every single day. They work really hard, and they actually buy into what Coach is trying to teach us. So I got no doubt that those guys are going to be ready behind me, and I'm going to do my job of making sure they're ready to go too.
Yeah, he got a lot of energy, and he's like an old school coach. He got a little old soul in him, and he just brings a lot of juice to practice and the meetings and stuff like that. He's a great guy. He wants to get to know you on a personal level. He's just also bringing a lot of experience from Kansas City, so it's always great. He's teaching what you taught Chris Jones, and he's bringing it to us. So
when they're willing to hold each other accountable, that's player leadership, and not when things are easy, but when things are hard. I gave the example to them. I don't mind saying it to you guys. It was 13-6 last year against Ohio State. We were losing at halftime, and it was like a revival in our locker room. They were so excited. They were like, freaking, Johnny just made that kick, and they're like, we're going to come back and win this game. And we almost did. And then the next week it was 13-7 against UCLA, and we run off the field. People are booing, which we get, right? And we're in the locker room, and it was literally I was up there I was praying, not really praying, but I was trying to come on, guys. It was just sad. My gosh, what's happening to us? And nothing happens to you in football. Like, you take control of it and you run with it, right? So it's like, but I think looking back, they're like, well, why were they different? Well, because we're listening to everything else instead of just what's our standard. No matter what the score is, we keep playing, we find a way. And you know what's crazy about that game? It was then 20-7, and it was then 27-7, and then we came back, we had a ball in 2 minute. Heinrich came out there and we had a chance to go tie the game to win it. So it's like, but you have to sometimes go through those things to learn, like, just keep playing. And that's, I can say that till I'm blue in the face. Players don't listen to coaches. They listen to each other, okay? And at the end of the day, like, they listen to each other. They hear me 20 minutes a day. They hear you guys a lot on social media. They listen to fans on social media, and they hear each other. So it's like, man, you guys have got to do a great job of saying, like, hey, guys, keep playing, keep playing, keep playing. So I like where we're at in that regard.
A lot there. We heard everything from Archie Wilson and the versatility that we alluded to before playing that sound. You had Cam Lenhart talking about the new addition defensive line coach and Terry Braden, Luke Lindenmeyer, very confident with the group that they have at tight end. But that last clip, I think, was a real big talking point amongst everybody who took the podium on Monday, and that is accountability, player-led type of team. The dorms for the first year over at Selleck is going to be players only, with the exception of a couple of training personnel, people that need to be there. But as far as the coaches, they're not there. I get a lot of these preseason storylines. Certain people are going to take with a grain of salt, and other people are going to say, okay, I could see some substance to that or significance to that. I think that's been an element of this team, this program for many years that has been missing, that accountability, that consistency. And there's been certain players within the program over the last several years that will take that accountability and will take that onus, but not enough, in my opinion, Grant. And we'll see if this can help move that along, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll be very interested here in just a few seconds when we chat with Evan Bland of the Omaha World-Herald, what his thoughts are on that. That is, I think, my biggest question leaving the press conference on Monday was, okay, everybody, every single player and every coach has beat the player-led drum all press conference long. Is that smoke? Is that just some fall camp classic nobody's lost a game yet sort of talk, or is it something that's actually impactful and different? And so I think, to me, leaving, that was the biggest question I had, and we will have to wait a few weeks before we actually see an answer to that. But
before we get to Evan, we're going to do so here in about a minute. You also heard Emmett Johnson talk about depth of the running back room.
Yeah.
To me, that's intriguing because even in practice, we saw Quentin Ives come up a little bit limp, hoping he's okay. I mean, again, first practice, that could be nothing more than a cramp. We'll see what happens, but it's still a very unproven group behind Emmett Johnson.
Sure.
And so depth from a potential standpoint, sure, I could buy that, but proven depth remains to be seen right now.
A ton of unknowns. There are a lot positive about Mekhi Nelson. But again, none of those guys have actually played in an in-game situation yet, or at least enough reps to feel confident about what they bring to the table. And so that's another large question mark, even though Emmett Johnson, I think, is one of the team's better solids, better known quantities. The rest behind him is unknown, and the coaching staff is very upfront about the fact that, hey, we're going to need 2 or 3 guys to be productive for us throughout the entirety of the season if we want to be successful.
Well, as we said, we're going to have a good conversation here throughout the season with this next gentleman. He's on the Husker football beat, baseball beat, and anywhere else they ask him to go. Great content always from Evan Bland of the Omaha World-Herald, who's kind enough to join us right now. And Evan, we were talking a little bit about just that Monday takeaway from not only what we heard from the players and Coach Rhule, but also what we had a chance to see in the 20 minutes or so of observation of practice. And I know you were one of the first to tweet it out. I saw a lot of people follow as far as the physical appearance, and one in particular with what we have seen from Carter Nelson. And for a guy that went through a little offseason surgery, a guy that also is growing into that body, which natural to see, that freshman to sophomore jump, just seeing him without pads on made me think that's what a Big Ten potential playmaking tight end is supposed to look like.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's one of the things I take out of those open practices, especially the first one in training camp where you kind of see what kind of gains guys have made over the course of the last few months. And Carter Nelson absolutely looked the part. And you think back to his background. I mean, he had never lifted weights out of Ainsworth really at all. And he comes to Nebraska and he's able to play most of the season, get into most of the games. And a lot of that was pure athleticism. And remember, he hadn't even really played 11-man football. It was all 8-man variety. And so he does a little bit of work at receiver. You mentioned he has the off-season surgery. And, you know, I kind of laugh at what Matt Rhule said at Media Days last week when he was asked about Carter Nelson's availability. He said, yeah, he better be healthy. Like, they're counting on him. And he looked like a dude. He'd put on some weight. Like we said, he was already explosive. He was a national-level high jumper in high school. And now he's been in that Nebraska machine for more than a year doing the strength training and the nutrition, and it just sort of adds to what that tight end room could be. And I think Carter Nelson, in that shift from receiver to tight end, like, you're going to see a guy who has an ability to high point a football, who's more acclimated to the college game, the 11-man game. And, I mean, again, he was a 4-star kid. You think about all the schools that offered him out of high school. They all saw the potential and just sort of the high-quality clay that he is to work with as a football prospect. And he's certainly starting to look the part. It's going to be really interesting to see how he's integrated into the offense in his new role.
Evan, if we had the physical aspects as the main key, perhaps, for the open practice portion of Monday's media availability, I think the main theme for the press conference portion was player-led. That was the drum that just kept being beat over and over and over again from player to player to player, more often than not being brought up organically. It came from Rhule on down. How much stock do you put into that in terms of how it would potentially change Nebraska this year? Or is that just sort of something that no matter what, when you get to year 3 of a head coach and it's fall camp and it's day 1, that's something that people just kind of gravitate towards talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an end-all, be-all, but I think it's certainly a symptom of a healthy program. We heard about that in Vegas, too, where Rhule kind of joked that the players had told him, hey, you know, maybe you don't need to be here. We can handle this thing. And kind of the same thing now, where they essentially boot the coaches out of the dorms and say, hey, you know, we want this to be our team. We don't need maybe the supervision that we did a couple years ago. You know, it's a sign that they know what the standard is. They know, and the players are taking ownership of it. I think that was the other thing we saw even from the practice, Grant, was the messaging around the program is own it, take personal responsibility for it. I think that's something that Matt Rhule has observed from staffers. He's observing now from the player group, that they're not doing this for the coaches. They're not doing this because they're even really being told to do it. They're doing it because they want to win and they want to do it for each other, and that's a deeper motivation, right? Like, you're going to dig a little deeper, you're going to do a little more, you're going to feel it a little bit more than you would if you're just, you know, checking it off the list or trying to satisfy somebody else. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing right now, is like these guys have an understanding of what the expectation is. They've integrated it, made it their own. This isn't that's something else we've heard. This isn't Coach Rhule's expectation. This is their expectation now. And there's just a little more power, I think, in that. How that translates into a game remains to be seen, but I think it's absolutely a good sign moving forward that this team is simpatico and kind of moving in the same direction.
Evan, I know the question was asked about the defensive line, the hell on wheels portion of Matt Rhule, and he said he's always going to think that his players, and he's confident his players are always going to be solid, because I think the question was, what makes you think that label is going to be appropriate for them? And he told us why. He just has confidence in his players no matter what. But we've heard since Vegas and then now on Monday talking about this going to be a really good team. This is going to be a really good team. Where do you think, in particular, all of that is coming from? Because it seems like he's a lot more definitive and not shy about talking about this team, you know, quote, making a run at this thing, and all of those different things we heard from Big Ten Media Days and even on Monday.
Yeah, I keep characterizing it as a quiet confidence. Like, Rhule's not shying away from the expectations. I don't think he's being overly flamboyant about it, but he's just like, yeah, we did good work in the offseason. We brought back a lot of talent. We brought guys in the portal that are going to be impact players. We invested financially in areas around the program. It's like, yeah, I think it's going to stand up. And I thought Media Days was notable last week because Rhule really kind of went deeper into why Nebraska could break out. And it started with the answer about Scott Frost, but what it really came down to was he felt like that was a place that had a solid foundation. It had the fan base. It had the things surrounding the football program that were sound. It had the tradition. And it was just a matter of building it back up. And the way they've built it back up in these last 2 years have been the things that people are excited about. It's a former 5-star quarterback now with a year of experience. It's 3 new coordinators, I think highlighted by Dana Holgorsen, a guy who's coordinated offenses at an elite level. It's, their investment in NIL/rev share. It's little things like the new grass fields and the way that they're re-graphicking the Hawks Center. Like, just it's all kinds of stuff that have gone into it. And so I think that's what gives it all substance, is you're not just saying for the sake of saying, yeah, I think we're going to be good this year because I hope we are. Like, you can point to definitive pieces of evidence and things that they've done for months and years that would point in that direction. So I think that's maybe the most exciting thing is, yes, there's optimism. There's always optimism surrounding Nebraska football. But I think more than in many recent years, you can point to specific reasons and facts to why that could translate onto the field this fall.
Evan, are we overthinking the changes at the coordinator positions? The potential instability, quote unquote, that maybe comes from that, or just perceived instability, because on the flip side of that conversation, you got 3 guys there that are all experienced, all quote unquote adults in the room as well. So do we overthink maybe as we go into this year the amount of change or again, I guess, instability that could come with all the movement of the coordinator spots?
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't really thought about it too much in that sort of, I guess, negative light. Like, it really does seem like there are upgrades across the board. I mentioned Holgorsen. Like, that's a clear upgrade from what Nebraska had. And I mean, the production the last 2 years would bear that out. Holgorsen's own track record at West Virginia and Houston would echo that. Certainly what we saw in November in the 3 games where he comes in essentially off the street, and we saw Nebraska have an uptick in terms of production and variety of attack. So I think that's clearly a positive. Mike Eckler, kind of the same thing. I mean, what he's done at Tennessee the last few years has been impressive. He's come in and had a conviction for what he wants to do, so much so that Nebraska makes a change at punter. After they already brought in a transfer, they make another change and go with Archie Wilson in the rugby-style operation. So that's a guy who has had success a certain way, is very convicted that way can work. Certainly is high energy. That's something where Nebraska special teams haven't been an asset or even just not a liability for a number of years. So I think that's a positive in progress. And then, John Butler was a guy 2 years ago who was on radars to be an NFL defensive coordinator, and circumstances went a certain way, and he ended up at Nebraska, and certainly they didn't want to lose Tony White, who goes down to Florida State. But Butler got a year under White. He's someone who's as knowledgeable of the X's and O's of anybody on the staff, and now he's doing it at the college level where he did it a few years ago. It's been a while, but that's probably the one position or side of the ball where you look at and you say it might be hard to equal the standard that the Black Shirts had the last couple of years. I think it's a clear upgrade offensively and on special teams. And with Butler, I mean, it very well could match what they did in the past. And the thing that we've been talking about for years with the defense, that next level to unlock, continues to be takeaways. Can you turn knockdowns into interceptions? Can you turn tackles into fumbles? Like if John Butler can bring out those traits in this group, then I think suddenly that group could absolutely be on par or exceed what they've had under Rhule so far.
Nearly 11 minutes into this, Evan, and it's taken me this long. It's taken myself and Grant this long to ask about Not black shirts or when they're going to be handed out, but offensive line. Takeaways from what we saw. We were talking about this earlier, just the physical nature of a guy like Rocco Spindler. Had a chance to see Henry Letofsky at Big Ten Media Days as well. It's a physically, I would say, imposing looking group. And I know Matt Rhule talked about the physical nature and what he likes to see from that standpoint out of the guys. But we know that if this offense is going to take that big step forward that it needs to take if this team is to be successful, that is going to be where it starts. Your confidence level going into fall camp with this group would be what?
Very high. I mean, I think that's probably where I start in terms of the strength of this football team overall. I mean, I think Nebraska legitimately could go 10 deep on their offensive linemen and feel pretty good about it. Obviously, what they brought out of the portal and Elijah Pritchett and Rocco Spindler, Letofsky at Media Days tells you all you need to know about what Nebraska thinks about him and his leadership and how far he's come along. Justin Evans, I mean, the coaching staff's been so high on him. He's been a reliable player who's maybe ready to take that next step now that he's the center. And then even the competition, like you talk about right tackle, okay, that's not settled. Is that Tyler Knack, who's been with the program for multiple years? Is that Gunnar Gatula, who performed really well as a left tackle for most of last season when he was called upon? Is that Teddy Prohaska, who's now back in full strength and who's been a multi-year starter? Like, it's a great spot for those guys to be in. And that's to say nothing about this next wave of guys that are going to emerge in the next year or two, the Grant Brickses and Preston Tamuas and Gibson Piles. Like, it's a deep group. It's a quality group. It's that ideal scenario that Matt Rhule often talks about, where you bring a guy in out of high school, you forget about him for 2 years as you're building him up behind the scenes, and then they pop out. And that's kind of where Nebraska is getting to at that point. Again, they had a couple of nice transfer additions that sort of bridge that gap maybe between what was last year and what's still to come. But it's a versatile group. It's one that can probably more than any other, maybe with the exception of the secondary, that can withstand injuries and can bring guys off the bench and perform without much of a drop-off. So the culture's strong there. You have some veteran leadership. You're older at that position than just about anywhere else. And so it's a great place to start when you talk about Nebraska's prospects as a team, and then certainly offensively as well.
Last one here for you, Evan. I feel like, to use a Gen Z term, the vibes are high going into fall camp. It's carried over from Big Ten Media Days. In your opinion, when's the last time Nebraska's vibes, confidence, expectations have been at this point, at this stage of the season?
Probably 2019. I mean, you're coming off of Adrian Martinez's freshman year, and he was a dark horse Heisman candidate, and the schedule sort of looked like it lined up well, and they were, I think, co-favorites atop the West Division at that time. You were in year 2 of Scott Frost, and things looked like maybe they were going in a positive direction. So I think you probably go back that far, and it's a unique juncture in the road, right? Because you're in year 3, you've built things up for 2 years, and Matt Rhule has his year 3 reputation, and there should be a payoff. And like, year 3 is when that payoff naturally tends to occur with a lot of programs. If it doesn't come this year, you look into year 4 and year 5, and it becomes a little harder to maybe convince some recruits and fans that things are coming along. So I think part of it is certainly the work that Nebraska's done. Part of it's just the timeline of where Matt Rhule is as a head coach. But I mean, there's a ton of confidence. I think the further you go into camp, like the more people start talking about winning 8 games and winning 9 games, and can they finish in the top third of the Big Ten, and that Penn State game is going to be close. Like, all this kind of stuff that starts to play into it. So for sure, there's a ton of optimism. If if you're Nebraska and you go out and you look good against Cincinnati in the opener, man, like, that hype train's going to be going full steam all the way into Michigan week in late September. So there's a huge opportunity here for Nebraska to build up some excitement in the fan base, one that's really just been starved for a winner for a long time. And oh, by the way, that happens to align with a time when you're trying to raise money and build up excitement for stadium renovations. And so it's a critical time for Nebraska, and the vibes are strong now. And with a win here in late August, I think they can be strong well into Michigan week, and then we'll see what happens.
Evan Bland, Omaha World-Herald, always great in-depth coverage with the fantastic team at the Omaha World-Herald and covering Husker football and all of our local sports. Evan, look forward to seeing you out there throughout the season. Can't wait to dive into all of the different storylines that you and Sam and everyone has there. But always appreciate your time, man. Be well.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Evan.
So we look at some of our practice takeaways from Thursday and just overall some of the news coming out of Lincoln. And what we feared, what we'd kind of been hearing throughout the week, Grant, was not good news on a position that you and I are both very intrigued on, the tight end position. And a guy that helped make that versatile group, there's that word again, versatile and versatility with him. They're going to be without one of those guys in Mac Markway, who unfortunately retore that ACL that he tore a year ago. And that's one of those situations. I think a lot of people go back to thinking of Thomas Fidone. Heck, I even thought about Allison Widener with the Nebraska women's basketball team too. There are just some people who have horrific luck when it comes to the injury front, and unfortunately Mac Markway experiencing that.
Yeah. Matt Rhule characterized it as a re-tear, or not necessarily a re-tear, but a repair failure, basically. So just really unfortunate news for him, especially because I think it began to flare up immediately after that first day of practice, his first day back practicing for football in over a year. Yeah. So it's just a really, really, really tough break for him. It's unfortunate, and it kind of, I don't know if it changes a whole lot. And for me, just in terms of that outlook of that tight end room, because we haven't seen him yet. We haven't actually seen him play any football games, but first and foremost for the person, Mac Markway, it's what can you say? It's unfortunate as can be.
You brought up something that I know these conversations are taking place after any type of injury early in fall camp. And that is, what does the injury, let me stop and not sound so insensitive, thinking about a player like that. And not only obviously hoping for a speedy recovery, but also the mental part of having to come back from that again, going through that rehab again. So,
and that was something Matt Rhule talked about with Teddy Prohaska.
Yes.
Because when you get hurt, it's a very, I think Matt Rhule characterized it as an isolating experience, because
you're on an island.
You're away from the rest of the team, whether it's a shoulder injury, a major knee injury, whatever else. You're going through a ton of hard things to try to get back to that. And so he just did that. He just spent a year doing that and now has to do it again. And so it's brutal.
The other part of this news is, again, what we always do when it comes to these types of injuries early in camp. How does it impact not only the team, but that position group? And you and I were talking about this earlier today before we were recording, and we were talking about if anybody had that projection of a 9-3 or 8-4 or even a 10-2 or heck, I don't know, 7-5 season, how much of that hinged on Mac Markway being a difference maker in that room. And I think you're going to be hard pressed to find anybody that would say, well, now this makes me rethink what my season prediction is. And I thought Dana Holgerson was asked a question today that was a very real response. And it wasn't insensitive or dismissive to the player that Mac Markway could be, but I think it was a very honest answer. Someone asked about how does this impact your tight end room? And he said, honestly, I don't know, because I never coached him.
I got to see him. I got to coach him for one practice.
Yeah, he was hopeful that he'd be a part of it, but he didn't know what that type of loss would do to this tight end group, because he hasn't been around him in a competitive game rep type environment. So, and I think that's where all of us
you still have the versatility too.
Sure.
Like Carter Nelson, very, very different type of body and person than Luke Lindenmeyer with different skill sets. And then on top of that, you've got Heinrich Harburg in there, which I still think is such an interesting wrinkle for your tight end group to have, where you've got a guy that opposing defense they're always going to have to game plan for his ability to throw the ball. And how creative can Dana Holgorsen get with him on the field? Again, it's another guy out there you have to think about, prepare for in a finite amount of time that you have during the week, and another guy that is going to take up some mental energy for the opposing defenses. Every time he's out on the field, he's going to have to be identified as a potential threat to throw, even if he's just coming across the formation and throwing a block on the backside of a play.
It stinks. I mean, there's no other way to say what Mac Markway's going through for the now second straight year. I mean, that absolutely sucks for him. It does. And I think he did add to the intrigue of the offseason of 100%. This tight end room. And unfortunately, Nebraska's going to be without one of those pieces. The other part we were talking about earlier, though, and I don't know if this is something, maybe it's just what we get wrapped up in when it comes to this time of the year and early practice reports and early podium sessions. Emmett Johnson talked about the depth of this running back room, and now for the second straight appearance by a coach, and these are Matt Rhule, obviously the head coach, Dana Holgorsen, a former head coach, two guys, Matt Rhule, now Dana Holgorsen, mentioning Mekhi Nelson. Something to keep your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, it's tough to say. I think it's something to keep your eye on for now. Nelson, again, is another guy that we don't have a whole lot of game tape on. We don't have a whole lot, but he's a guy who's drawing a lot of praise and apparently seems to be doing the right things here early on. And again, you need that 1-2 punch, at least, if not a 1-2-3 punch, to be successful in the Big Ten in just the terms of the wear that gets placed upon your running back. So you need to see that. Of course, that's a good thing to hear. So I'm excited about that. I'm also intrigued by the 2-minute offense comments that Dana Holgorsen made. I also wonder, like, a lot of times you have things that get recycled. It's kind of an echo chamber in a different way than maybe you normally think about it. Meaning, Matt Rhule will say something, then the media will hear it, then they will proceed to ask everybody else about that thing, and you kind of get these narratives bouncing back and forth off each other. And it's normal, but I do wonder how much of our perspective, okay, this is an early storyline for this team, is that the 2-minute offense is shaped by that. But that's a clear area of focus where Dana Holgorsen wants to see them take steps. Maybe you're talking winning the middle 8, for end of the first half going into the second half. Late stages, you have a chance to drive down, 2 minutes left to tie the game, you're down by 1 score. All those areas where Nebraska has been lacking severely over the last few years, and I think potentially maybe you can certainly say within the first 2 years of the Rhule era, and I don't know if you'd get much pushback from the coaching staff or Matt Rhule himself on that.
Jeremiah Jones also brought up again.
Yeah.
I know he's someone that...
Coach Shorts, speaking about him.
Shaquille Shorts talking about the wide receiving group as well. And then also kind of interesting what he said about Isaiah Mosey moving over from wide receiver over to running back and how that process works out, and that you do have to kind of fight for a guy, but
to keep him in your room,
right. But also knowing that someone is going to maybe benefit the team and that offense in a bigger way at the position that they're now transitioning in as Mosey is to the running backs. But
yeah, we talk about that
running
too,
backs, right?
Right. Like you have the running back room, and how does Mosey fit into that picture behind Emmett Johnson? I mean, that's a guy that probably isn't ready to go week 1, maybe in that spot, but maybe you get down the road, November, late October, and there's been an injury or two, and he's a guy who gets called upon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very, very real possibility, and something we've seen, Gabe Ervin Jr., for example. I mean, it's just stuff happens early on in the year that you can't control.
Speaking of impactful players, a guy that we know is going to be a major impact for this offense, a guy that is just fun to watch play, but also just to have a conversation with. We were fortunate to be around him and have that conversation with now sophomore and one of the key elements of that wide receiving room, Jacory Barney. Hey, it's Husker All Access, brought to you by Access Bank, here for a reason. Nick Handley here with Jacory Barney. And Jacory, exciting time. You guys getting through the first week of practice, getting into that second week as well here. And this offense, I know everyone's talking about, taking that step forward. For you, how does that happen?
For me personally, in my game, I'll say just becoming a more dominant receiver, more complete receiver. Just improving in my game, whether it's second level releases, defining my sticks and my breaks to create more separation, just becoming a more complete receiver, just making plays when the ball comes my way. That's all I say.
I know a lot of fans, when they think of Jacory Barney, they think of just elite speed. What about your game? And you kind of touched on some points there too. But what about your game goes beyond just being the fast guy, the playmaking guy on the field?
Yeah, beyond being a playmaker and all that. At the end of the day, I'm a great guy. I'm gonna bring my juice to the game, my energy. They're gonna feel me. The fans gonna feel me when I make a play. They're gonna feel me. And I'm for my size. Like people complaining I'm a smaller guy. I'm really not a small guy. It's just I'm around very large guys, and just being one of the toughest guys out there. I believe I'm a tough guy. If I take a hit, the fans don't have to be scared, bro. I'm good. I promise you, I'm good. I'm good.
You guys have some new faces in the wide receiving room too. What do you like about this group this year?
Just like the production of those guys. I'm proud to work with those guys. They're great human beings. Just trusting those guys to the right and left of me. I'm proud to have those in the room. Great role model type guys like Dan, Keaton, Isaiah. They're just great. They're great humans. And at the end of the day, beyond football, it's about who you are as a person. So I'm glad to work with those guys. And in between those lines, they're dogs. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of all the receivers in the room behind me. When their time comes, they're going to make the plays because at the end of the day, the standard is the standard, and they know that, and we all believe in that. So when we all get our chances, our shots to make plays, we all go in there and do that.
You got a new coach, new wide receivers coach too, and Da'Keel Shorts. What have you learned from him going all the way back to spring ball to where you guys are now?
Just knowing that I can be the best, I can be whoever I want to be. You know what I'm saying? Just knowing that I can be the best, whatever position receiver I am. You know, I can be the best in our conference, and I can do whatever I want to do. I just got to come out here with that mentality every day and work towards it and believe in it myself and work towards it, put the work in, and the results going to show on the field every Saturday.
I know there's a lot of people that talk about the freshman year of both you and Dylan Rhule, and I think that it seems to be kind of a package deal. And you know, there's obviously more to this offensive success than just you two, but that chemistry now in year two, what can fans expect between you and Dylan?
A lot of touchdowns, a lot of energy between me and him, and the rest of our team, of course. We got a new celebration. So we're gonna be doing that a lot, and yeah, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of juice. Yeah, we some great guys. I feel like we're great guys to be role models. Yeah. You know, we're great human beings, and yeah, we're great leaders to the team. Yeah.
Coach has talked about it, and what you just said there with being good role models. I know Coach has talked about just your involvement with some of the youth camps that they've had here, and just in the community, your love for football, but just being one of those great representatives of this football program. Is that something you do take pride in?
Yes, I take pride in that because at the end of the day, I was one of those kids, you know, and some of those kids may feel like, oh, nah, he's too, you know, he would never, you know, do that for me because he's like, they see us as higher than. Right. But at the end of the day, I just come out there and let them know that I'm a human just like them, and I just show my love for them while I can. I know they love and support me each and every Saturday, and while I can have the opportunity to show them that I care and love that they support me and I support them, I just come out there with the energy that I would bring to the football field and my love for them. So I let that shine. I let God's light to shine through me.
That's awesome. I do want to ask you also about this a very deep secondary that you guys have on this team. You're working against those guys when you got good-on-good situations.
Yes, sir.
What type of battles are you seeing early on here in camp?
It's heated, most definite is heated. In the locker room, we're talking like, all right, I got you tomorrow. Like, all right, you're going to see, it's crazy. But when we out there in the lines, we know that we just working towards the same goal. And it's always good to go against those great DBs and those DBs that came from different levels of football and knowing that it's greatness everywhere. So when we here, we working, we all working towards the same goal, and I'm proud of our secondary. I'm proud of what we brought in. I'm proud of all the guys that we already had, and I'm proud to work with them each and every day, and I'm happy to get them that work every day.
Lastly, dorms player-led this year. Now, I know there's probably certain things that are going to stay within dorms that are amongst the team. It's a sacred place, but how has dorm living been so far? And any funny stories that have come out of the first week or so?
Nah, we we're more focused on the football. We haven't we play games and stuff in the open areas, but just building our brotherhood really for the most part, and waking up, being on schedule, doing what we're asked to do. At the end of the day, trying to limit the mistakes and just come together as a unit. Yeah. So it's been smooth. It's been what they make it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's smooth to me. I did a year of it. It's my second year of it. It's a part of the process, and we're all bought in. So I'm embracing it. Whenever we get to go home, I'm going to embrace that also. But yeah, it's a part of the process, and we ain't complaining.
Jacory Barney joining us here. Jacory, really appreciate you spending time with us. Best of luck this season.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
All right. That is Husker All Access, brought to you by Access Bank.
All right, so wrapping up our first show here of Husker Huddle, and again, appreciate you being with us, and hopefully you'll be with us along for the entire season. So speaking of that season, kickoff August 28th, Arrowhead Stadium. We're usually on normal shows as we get into the week, the game week, we'll be taking a look at not only the opponent, but we'll be looking at the metrics in the matchups itself.
Yes.
But since we don't have that quite yet, we know who the opponents are, but we don't have all those metrics yet because we haven't seen a game yet. We're going to get into a little bit of the preview and what you can expect for the first three opponents for Nebraska, all their non-conference schedule. And Cincinnati, it's an appetizing matchup. This was one that I think when we knew it was on the schedule, this could be problematic for Nebraska. The way Cincinnati was trending, and of course, Luke Fickell was still the head coach when this was on the schedule. No longer the head coach, obviously. Scott Satterfield is the coach there. And this is a team that kind of fallen below that standard that Luke Fickell was able to build them up to make that college football playoff run not that long ago. But this is a team that, you're coming off of a disappointing season. You're also looking at a Vegas win total in 2025 at 6.5, Grant. And really, right now, the money is on the under. You've got, what are they? I got to look at the
Satterfield. People are not believing in what Coach Scott Satterfield has to offer.
Yeah. They're minus 145 for the under, plus 110 for the over of 6.5 wins right now. So, again, a lot of people thinking that they're not going to hit that over of 6.5, that this is going to be a 6-win at best type team. Again, to the betting public right now.
Yeah, it's an odd situation because both these programs are kind of in a semi-similar spot in that you're both in year 3 of a new head coach, and both teams are under pressure to show a sign of progress that is above 500. Good start for Cincinnati last year. They started 5-2, but they proceeded to lose their last 5, burn a lot of goodwill. Is it looking like a true Big 12 team yet? That's another thing you got to think about as they begin this new era in the Big 12, and they're trying to become a Power 5 or now Power 4 level program. So that's what they're in progression of doing right now. Brendan Sorsby is the quarterback. He's back from a year ago, over 2,800 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks, 9 rushing touchdowns, 447 rushing yards. So he is a dual threat, a traditional dual threat for them.
You've got mainline guys at different areas of this football team. You mentioned Sorsby, and then Dante Corleone on the defensive side there, kind of that run stopper, clogging up the middle there too. That's a big key element to have back on your defense because you like to feel like you can work around that. Matthew McDoom that they bring in from Coastal Carolina, he's expected to be, he was one of the more heavily sought after corners in the transfer portal. So they do get him. So they feel like, even though he hasn't been with Cincinnati, McDoom is one of those guys that has a lot of good college football experience that can hopefully anchor that secondary of theirs. But it just between, a new addition to McDoom, what you have with Corleone and Sorsby, it's a wide receiving group. Again, they're bringing in 3 transfers. Does that sound familiar as well? That they're hoping that even though those guys have not been in the Cincinnati uniform, that these are guys with college football experience, highlighted by a Texas A&M transfer, that they can at least get what we're used to seeing Big 12 offenses be able to produce, especially in the passing attack.
Evan Pryor, Tawee Walker, also in there at transfers from Ohio State and Wisconsin, respectively, at the running back position. So a lot of new pieces. And Dante Corleone, he does go by the Godfather.
He should be.
That is his nickname. His archetype, very, very Nash-esque to me. Just a guy who sucks up space, not going to have career stacks, 3-time All-Conference selection, first-team All-Big 12 a year ago. So he's a big piece. Akron, next on the docket, 4-8 a year ago.
And this is going to be an interesting team. I'm always very fascinated in the new world of college football, how you continue to motivate the group of 5 type outfits. The MAC, I think, is one of the more notable conferences. So teams that come out of the MAC, there's always that identity of toughness. And I think Akron has had that in previous years, but this is an Akron team that is ineligible for the bowl season because of the academic performance rate that they fell under that threshold. So they cannot compete for a MAC championship, or at least in the MAC championship game, and they cannot play for a bowl. So it always feels like now more than ever has been so important to try to motivate your guys to stick around. How do you do that when you know that your regular season is it? And there's nothing beyond that. And this is a team that struggled a year ago. Again, looking at the Vegas win total, 4.5, and much like Cincinnati, the money is on the under, not the over for this Akron team.
Yeah, massive transfer exodus with that bowl ban, or rather restriction. Ben Finley's the quarterback, 2,600 passing yards, 16 touchdowns. He transferred there from Cal a year ago, so he's in year 2 in the program. Taj Bullock, he transferred to Colorado State. He was kind of the rushing quarterback, so he's gone. And then Michael Johnson Jr., he comes in from Syracuse, who he had previously spent time at Florida Atlantic and Penn State, so he kind of is that rushing quarterback archetype that is coming in to back up Finley. And then a lot of change on the defense. 6 of top 7 tacklers from a year ago are gone. They opened their season at Wyoming on Thursday night, same night as Nebraska. So if you want to get a little double box action going, you can.
Justin Anderson, one of the key additions, key returners to anchor that secondary. 44 tackles from Anderson. But other than that, you're looking at a completely new defensive look for the most part with this Akron team. Finley is considered to be maybe one of the better quarterbacks in the MAC when all is said and, when all is said and done. So who will he have to throw to? Can he put up those numbers? He was just under 2,500 passing yards last year, but they're expecting him to make a big jump. And then being able to have Alex Adams returning. This was a guy that was an all preseason and all MAC performer in 2022, played limited in 23 and was out completely last year due to injury. They do get him back, so that's going to be one of the key targets on top of Jake Newell, who you mentioned at the tight end position. Houston Christian.
5-7 a year ago. No win total from Vegas for Houston Christian, you sickos. So if any of you is betting on Houston Christian football, we've got some problems. By the way, the win total for Vegas was 4.5. That's where that line was set. 30 transfer additions to this year's teams. Again, 6 of the top 7 seniors from last year's squad. Well, obviously, seniors, they're gone. Mike Nesbitt, he was hired in March, former head coach at Ottawa University. He is the new offensive coordinator for the program. But yeah, that's just the overarching look in a second year of head coach Jason Bachtel.
Yeah, and Bachtel, it's interesting, kind of in a similar situation. You brought up Nesbitt, bringing in a guy that had head coaching experience as the OC.
Yeah,
Bachtel was the OC at Houston Christian. I almost said Houston Baptist, Houston Christian. That they had some really good offensive performances. In fact, when he was running that offense, they had their first winning season in a long time. Last year had some milestone moments too. They were able to get their first ranked opponent victory. They did so against McNeese, who was rated 22 at the time, and then had their largest victory over Northwestern State, where they put up, I think it was 66 points. But in that victory over McNeese, they rushed for 414 yards in that game. So, like you typically see from these types of teams, there could be some very either run-heavy teams or pass-heavy teams where there's no real balance offensively. And you mentioned Nesbitt being the new OC. I don't know if they're going to change a little bit of their offensive identity, but this is the team that when they had success, they came at you. And that's interesting, Grant, from a standpoint of, well, you're still breaking in, I won't say a completely new front seven for Nebraska, but you are getting guys, especially in that defensive line, a little bit more acclimated to a heavier workload. So you get a run-heavy offense like they were a year ago, that could be interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating setup, especially too when you think about some of the comments that Bachtel made, or just the general ethos that's coming off that program, especially as they come to Nebraska, where they're saying, look, if you guys want to play at the next level, you're going to have to play in these sorts of hostile road environments. And so this is a good learning experience on that front, which kind of implies to me almost as we enter this new age of college football, there are some schools that are almost becoming self-aware as being feeder programs for the larger college football Division I level that like, hey, we're going to have to win now is by bringing guys in and saying, this is how we're going to help you get to the next level. It's almost the feel I'm getting off of that group, which is very, very interesting.
That, and you get a little bit north of $500,000 to play that game as well.
Also helpful.
That typically does help out a little bit. That's it for our first show. I really appreciate, again, everyone tuning in, listening in here on the Husker Huddle. We're just getting the season started. We're going to be doing this every Thursday, once a week, as we will be at practices, games, and we will be covering everything that you want to know about and want to talk about. And so we're looking forward to getting this thing started. Week number 1 of Husker Fall Camp in the books. And again, we'll see what week 2 holds. Yes, absolutely. For Grant Hansen, I'm Nick Handley. Appreciate you guys. And until next time, we'll talk to you later here on the Husker Huddle.